parties can be equal partners in building a cooperation that works for all of us. As a country, Namibia has greatly benefited since 2000 until the year 2020, of course. This cooperation has not only contributed to our development as a state, but has holistically contributed to growing the partnerships between all the parties that are joint partners of this cooperation. And I hope that it continues to do so in the next 20 years moving forward. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to see that under the various strategic priority areas of the new partnership agreement, there is a particular focus on gender and human development focus. This is because I am today one of the speakers who not only was a speaker and a host in 2016 of the first ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly hosted in Windhoek in Namibia 2016 as a youth forum, where I was not only a City of Windhoek Junior Mayor and a Deputy Speaker of the Children's Parliament, but come full circle in 2022, I am now a substantive Member of Parliament and Deputy Minister at the age of 25. This shows the power of investing in young people, but particularly young women, in areas where they're able to have a voice to not only contribute to the development of their countries, but to jointly contribute to the development of this joint partnership across the world. And I'm happy to see that Article 1, different from Article 1 in 2000, speaks about promoting and protecting human rights, of course, our democratic principles across the world, and the rule of law to ensure that we foster a human and social development and combat climate change, as earlier said, to ensure that we protect the environment and ensure sustainable management of natural resources. And I say this because as a country such as Namibia that has had serious shocks where climate change is concerned, we have a particular interest in ensuring that this partnership will ensure that we're able to handle the shocks that come with the drought spells that we have endured even before the COVID-19 pandemic, and even now post the COVID-19 pandemic, where there could be a risk of more environmentally harmful situations. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to speak briefly about the role of young people and the ACP. I think it's important that this assembly, and especially the current establishment, considers an ACP Youth Forum. And I know this particularly would be important because I'm a product of youth engagements and youth forums at the highest level that not only prepared me for public service, but prepared me for leadership that is youth-centered and ensuring that young people who make up majority of our societies in our various countries be part of our decision-making processes. Therefore, I would like to encourage all of the members that are taking part in this assembly today and who have recommitted themselves to the new partnership agreement for the next 20 years to strongly consider an ACP Youth Forum that will ensure that a youth-centered approach to all the decisions and considerations that we take forward for the next 20 years are having a youth approach. And I say this because I know that the revised Georgetown Agreement, that the Youth Forum was omitted. And I hope that moving forward, we'll ensure that as young people continue to be partners in implementing this Youth Forum and Youth Agreement with a youth focus, will not only ensure inclusivity as contained in one of our strategic priority areas, but ensure that young people, and especially young women, continue to have a seat at the table. And I can give an example of Namibia. I was not only a product of the Youth Parliament as part of our parliamentary structure, or the Junior Council as part of our local authority structure. I was also a product of continuous effort and investment in youth development, not only at leadership level, but at capacity level, to ensure that a young person like me is prepared not only now, but in the future for leadership that could take this agreement forward 20 years from now and 20 years after that. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I am very grateful to be part of the proceedings this year at a momentous occasion that celebrates not only 20 years before, but 20 years to come of the new partnership agreement of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank Your Excellency, Ms. Emma Theophilus, Deputy Minister of Information, Communication and Technology, Republic of Namibia, for your remarks. Thank you for those very thoughtful and engaging words and your contribution to our discussions. Our second speaker is Mr. Koen Doens, Director General of the European Commission, Directorate General, International Partnerships. Mr. Doens worked for many years with Louis Michel and is very well placed to talk to us about the Cotonou Agreement and the Joint Parliamentary Assembly. Mr. Doens, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, and it is really a pleasure to be here with you. And let me start with passing you all a sincere message of Louis Michel, with whom indeed, as his chief of cabinet in the early years of this century, we worked very hard and very well with many of you, done many joint parliamentary assemblies with him to bring the Cotonou Agreement alive. And I'm particularly pleased to be in this session where we look back and where we look forward, because these are very strange and historic times. Strange times to a certain extent, because when it comes to our partnership, we are somehow living at the same time the sunset and the dawn. The sunset of Cotonou, which sees slowly the sunset, but is being prolonged for a while still, and the dawn of post-Cotonou, where negotiations have successfully been concluded by the chief negotiators, but where we are still working, as my commissioner no doubt has stressed yesterday, to get the agreement signed. But these are especially historic times, because I think it's been a very, very long time since the rules-based order and the international values that lie at the basis of it have not been under such stress as they are today. And that's extremely worrying. And I think that our partnership between the European Union and the ACPS precisely shows the importance of alliances as this. We all have to work, we all have to stand by an international rules-based order and the international values that lie at the basis of it, because none of us has an interest in a world where might makes right. I think that the basis on which we've worked over all those years is critical, and I think that these are times where we need to defend that vision of the world. It is very much linked to a second element, which is also a key feature of the Cotonou and of the post-Cotonou agreement, which is indeed our strong belief, our strong attachment in principles and values such as respect for human rights, democracy, and rule of law. I think we all strive to have societies where people are free, where people are equal, and where there is solidarity between one another. Liberté, égalité, et fraternité. And I think to have those societies, our countries need to walk a narrow corridor, as was so brilliantly set out, I think, in a book dating, 2 years ago by Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson. A narrow corridor where our countries have institutions that are strong enough to govern and civil society that is strong enough to keep society alive and questioning. And I think that it's therefore extremely appreciated, extremely well done, that I have the opportunity here to be with you, parliamentarians from the EU and the ACP states, because you are essential components of societies that walk this narrow corridor, and that I'm extremely pleased to be here with three young persons from Africa, the Caribbean and the Pacific, because youth, especially given its very strong presence in the demography of your countries, is an essential, thriving, driving component of such healthy civil society and healthy societies. Now, where does it take us in terms of Cotonou? I mean, I think that since the inception of it with the Yaoundé Convention, 1963, long time ago, I wasn't born, neither were most of you, I think. We've seen how through the 4 successive Lomé conventions and then Cotonou 20 years ago, how our partnership between the EU and the ACPS has had the strong capacity to adapt itself. Yaoundé, 4 Lomé conventions, then Cotonou. If you compare these agreements, you can see how they have grown, evolved, innovated and adapted to the times. I think especially 20 years ago when we concluded Cotonou, it was really an agreement that was way ahead of the curve. It was a legally binding agreement between 79 ACP states and the EU, member states representing 1.5 billion people worldwide. It was based on values and principles. It had a very wide scope, covering development cooperation, trade, political dialogue. It set up joint institutions. If you look back at it, it's really a unique model of partnership that we created in those days, and that had a number of features that were truly innovative and very much in tune with the times. The Joint Parliamentary Assembly as an institution has, I think, played a critical role, allowing under the partnership for these democratic exchanges. And as you've said earlier, indeed, not always synergetic, quite often on controversial issues. But that's what the real partnership is about. It is about offering the possibility to have debates on topics on which we do not all necessarily see eye to eye. And I think the GPA has allowed for those kind of discussions, and through the debates organized, through the resolutions adopted on key societal issues that we all have to deal with, has been an incredibly important component to the liveliness, to the reality of our partnership. I think we can be proud of what we achieved in those past decades. I think ultimately, if we look at it in light of the Millennium Development Goals, we have quite a strong track record on what we've done in contributing to the fight against poverty, to food security, to social protection, and a number of innovative features like what we did with the African Peace Facility on conflict management, or what we have developed in terms of linking relief, rehabilitation, and development. I think our partnership has also been critical in shaping the new Agenda 2030 of the Sustainable Development Goals, and we know, I think we've referred to it many times, how extremely critical our partnership has been in those important negotiations on the Paris Agreement on climate change. Now, the world, of course, has dramatically changed since Cotonou was signed. We've seen many things changing, and just to name a few, I mean, we've seen quite different patterns of development across ACP countries, also in the context of population growth. We've seen deepened regional dynamics, both within and beyond ACP countries. We've seen untapped economic opportunities arise. We've seen growing security challenges, like linked to terrorist threats, and especially we have seen global challenges arise that deeply affect many of us. You've made reference already to climate change. We must also mention the whole digital agenda that permeates economy and society and so on. So we needed to adapt the agreement, and I think that what the chief negotiators have achieved for the post-Cotonou agreement is really a modern agreement that puts partners even more than before on an equal footing, and that especially makes it fit for the challenges of our time. It's tailored with these regional protocols to the realities of the three regions, bringing it as close as possible to the people. But at the same time, and it's always been a key objective of it, it keeps the unity of the ACPS group alive and strong. I think that with post-Cotonou, people will have an even stronger voice through the parliaments. And I think that the innovation of having regional parliamentary assemblies will be a critical and very important innovation of the new post-Cotonou agreement, combined with a structured engagement with civil society and with youth in particular. I think this partnership stands really as a beacon of hope for responsible global leadership and solidarity. And I think we absolutely need that in these times. And I think that if we look at the collective power that we have, the numbers that matter on the multilateral scene, I do hope that we can use this future partnership again to keep weighing on what is happening at the global stage. We can influence the global agenda, we can shape responses to global challenges such as climate change, and we can improve the management of global public goods so that we push strongly to achieve the SDGs and deliver on Agenda 2030. Obviously, for all of this to happen, we will have to first sign the agreement before the new parliamentary setting can come to life. And as recalled by my commissioner yesterday, almost 1 year has passed now since the initialing of the post-Cotonou agreements. I think the negotiators have done their job. We've provided a balanced and comprehensive text that is up to the challenges of our time, and it is now important that the GPA loudly expresses its support and loudly expresses its concerns for a swift signature and the provisional application of the new agreement in earnest and as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cohen-Dowens, for your important contribution to our discussions today. Now I'm pleased to turn to our three young speakers from the three ACP regions. To begin with, I will give the floor to Ms. Bitania Lulu Berhanu from Ethiopia, who has just finished serving as Special Advisor on the Youth to European Commissioner Jutta Urpilainen. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Good morning and good afternoon for those joining from abroad, like myself. My name is Bitania Lulu, a very passionate young African leader from Ethiopia, joining you today from Addis Ababa. And it is my immense pleasure to address the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly today. I'd like to start with demography. There are about 1.8 billion young people in the world right now, and around 60% of Africa's population is under the age of 25. And more than a third of the population is between the ages of 15 to 34, and our median age is 19, including my country, Ethiopia. But despite this significant demography, young people, and especially young women, have largely been excluded from policy formulation and decision-making processes. But if we want to create a better world and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, to reach the aspirations of the African Union Agenda 2063, as well as effectively implement the partnership agreement between the member states of the EU and of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, we really need to ensure the inclusion of the voices of youth and attain youth ownership and leadership in our actions. And I'm certain that intergenerational co-leadership with youth brings sustainable change that we want to see. And in this regard, I'm very honored to have served as the first Special Advisor on Youth to EU Commissioner for International Partnerships, Commissioner Uttarapalainen. And my term has ended just 3 days ago, and I'm succeeded by vibrant young women from Malaysia, Ms. Kira Yusri. So Commissioner Uttarapalainen is a very strong believer of youth empowerment, and in her work, she has been consulting me as her special advisor in her key efforts to promote youth participation and empowerment as part of her portfolio. And she's also launched the first youth sounding board comprising of 25 young people from across the world, which fit into the decision-making processes of the Commissioner and also the Directorate General for International Partnerships. And to manifest this true partnership with young people as development partners, together with the youth sounding boards and different inputs from various youth structures, we are developing EU's first youth action plan for external action that is scheduled for adoption this September. And this plan will open spaces for youth to shape EU's foreign policy and will respond to calls by young people themselves to be meaningfully engaged and to strengthen meaningful youth participation. I would like to recommend for this ACP-EU joint partnership today that you also include meaningful youth engagement in your portfolio. It starts with creating spaces for youth to identify the solutions to key challenges of various scopes, backed with equipping them with tools and skills they need to advocate for and also create the solutions. And this should be really followed by commitments from leaders like yourselves to instill young people's recommendations in policy and decision-making platforms. Meaningful engagement of youth also requires improving our systems to enable youth leadership and participation and youth collaboration with other generations and multi-stakeholder partners. What I aspire to see from the ACP-EU partnership in the post-Cotonou era is then a formal structure to meaningfully engage young people from Africa, Europe, the Caribbean, and the Pacific states to inform, to co-implement, and to play roles in the strategic priorities and cooperation plan of the ACP-EU joint agreement. And I also believe in the power of research-based and youth-led advocacy in which young people themselves set the agenda for change. Young people are really experts. We know well the issues that are on the ground. Our generation is, I really believe, the most informed and connected, as well as the most innovative and energetic. We surely are a group that can transform the world we live in today by disrupting stagnant systems that simply don't work. Therefore, I would like to base my aspirations for the ACP-EU partnership of the post-Cotonou era on the collective outcomes of the Africa-Europe Week's Youth Track, which took place in February this year, and the sidelines of the African Union and European Union Summit. The Africa-Europe Week was organized to bring together young people, civil society, and the private sector from Africa and Europe to discuss the aspects of the Africa-EU partnership that mattered to them most. And the youth consultations, which had about 15 consultations, were guided and themed around by the key recommendations gathered from directly engaging over about 450,000 children and youth from across Africa and Europe through a digital campaign run by African Union, European Union, and UNICEF. And I've read the negotiated agreement text by the EU and OACP chief negotiators that was initialized on 15th April 2021, and learned that this partnership agreement has 6 strategic objectives and priorities, and all of which are very much in tune to what young people from Africa and Europe requested for in their joint declaration of the Africa-Europe Week. So I would like you to really reflect on the 6 priorities and feeding into the 3 things that the young people came up with. The first thematic area would be youth political participation. Young people want our leaders to recognize the leadership roles that we play. So we need our seats in the decision-making tables and also negotiating tables. This will confirm an effective intergenerational co-leadership. And I see in the second strategic priority for the ACP-EU joint partnership, there was a mention of peace and security. Young people want to also be involved in peace and security and leading peace and reconciliation in their countries and all phases of encountering violence, as well as negotiation and reconciliation processes. And we want accountability and transparency from our governments. And young people that were part of the youth track from Africa, Europe, and diaspora boldly demanded 35% quota systems for youth, 50% of which to be given for women. So these things fell under the youth political participation. The second one would be accelerating human development, which directly feeds into the third and fourth thematic focus areas of the ACP-EU partnership, which is human and social development, and also inclusive sustainable economic growth and development. So under accelerating human development, young people of the 2 continents demanded knowledge and cultural exchange platforms that enhance people partnership between African, European, and diaspora youth. They would like more investment in quality and comprehensive education, not only in the formal sector, but equally in the informal education and TVET and civic education as well, so that they can have advocacy skills and leadership skills to co-lead with our leaders. And in the health sector, young people really demanded the intensification of Team Europe's efforts, as well as to support EU's COVID response fund to strengthen the fight against the pandemic and vaccine injustices. And beyond COVID, young people really requested financing to strengthen the weak health systems, including access to quality, affordable, youth-friendly sexual reproductive health services. That leads me to the third point that young people demanded, which is accelerating the green and digital transition, sustainable growth, and decent jobs. Under this, and the thematic of digital transition, young people demanded the increased access to digital technologies, internet capacity development, and digital literacy skills, as well as job readiness and entrepreneurship training. Under green transition, young people of the 2 continents requested that we need to be included in climate action and environmental preservation actions as well. Young people need to meaningfully be engaged also to improve disaster preparedness, resilience, and management, and system and strategies for food security, with young people as key informants and contributors. So these 3 topics directly fit into the strategic priorities of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. And I would like to plead that the inputs gathered from this African and European and diaspora youth get integrated in the actions of this parliament. And we hope to see the creation of a transparent and robust mechanism for youth participation in the design and implementation of the policies in the ACP-EU and EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. The future is what we make of it today, and we must do it together with youth. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for your important contributions to our discussion, Ms. Bitania Lulu. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Christina Williams from Jamaica. Ms. Williams is a member of the European Commission Youth Sounding Board on International Partnerships. Ms. Williams, you have the floor. Welcome. Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you. Young persons below the age of 30 account for nearly 60% of the total Caribbean youth population. And although this is a large number, Caribbean youth are more than just a percentage. We are vibrant, creative, resilient, bursting at the seams with untapped potential. We are the student, the scholar, the enterprising entrepreneur, the next Usain Bolt, the next Bob Marley. But we're also the young person from the boroughs of the inner city communities as some of our most volatile areas in our Caribbean community. But we're also challenging negative stereotypes. We're also the young person from a small farming community like I am, who have chosen to use purpose and passion to advance myself. The Caribbean youth is diverse and dynamic. The Caribbean youth is not a monolith. Co-presidents of the Assembly, other members of the Assembly, thank you so much for having me here today. I am Christina Williams from the beautiful island of Jamaica, where I serve as a youth activist and servant leader. But one of the most important lessons I have learned since championing young people's issues since the tender age of 9 is that if we truly want to invest in young people, we have to ensure that we don't frame this narrative from just what privileged youth like myself, who is able to be here today, state, but rather to look at the average, the disenfranchised, and the marginalized youth as we decide on what we prioritize for cooperation and investment going forward. It was Professor Robert Dussey, Minister and Chief Negotiator of the OACP-EU, who noted that that this partnership, renewed terms of cooperation, is repositioning the partnership in regards to new objectives in a world that has changed profoundly and is in constant transformation. Commissioner Uta Orpelin have also said that it is a new and comprehensive partnership and is expected to be game-changing. So the question here today is, how can we change the game for young people of the Caribbean region? And the answer is through quality education, meaningful employment, social security, climate action, and meaningful youth partnership. In regards to education, school closures would have left 7 million learners and over 90,000 teachers across 23 countries out of school and would have to rely on distance learning. We would have seen a lot of learning loss and learning poverty. And pre-pandemic, UNESCO would have noted that the Caribbean actually had highest rates of inequality and inequity in terms of access to quality education. If we want to ensure that we have equitable and inclusive education, we must ensure that young people of our region have access to reliable and affordable internet connectivity, that we have devices, that our parents and students alike are equipped to navigate these online platforms. Because reliance on face-to-face learning alone will not ensure sustainable and equitable education. We see crises that have continued. The pandemic is still ongoing, and so we cannot rely on only a face-to-face environment to ensure quality education. Therefore, this is an area that the ACP-EU could cooperate with Caribbean regions on. And now, if we have educated and empowered young people, we're looking at young people who are more able to transition to a working environment where they can make a meaningful wage and be able to afford a standard of living that is at a high quality. Young people will be able to afford housing, afford insurance. This is something that we see as a major challenge in our Caribbean region. But empowered young people, educated young people cannot exist in an environment that's not healthy and that's not safe. We see countless earthquakes in Haiti. Recently, we had Hurricane Dorian in Bahamas. And so we're calling on the ACP-EU to support young people as we work towards climate action as well as environmental justice in an intersectional framework that considers age, disability, sex, class, etc. But there's an area here that we think is untapped, and that's the orange economy. According to the World Bank, between 2002 and 2005, the size of the international market for creative goods doubled to US $509 billion. The Caribbean has always been known for its musicians, its dancers, its filmmakers, its designers. We are bursting at the seam with creative talent. And so if the ACP-EU could work with young people in our region to invest in our infrastructure, to assist us as we market ourselves, as we get training from other countries as well, and to return to our homes to pass on that knowledge to others, we could see a sustainable economic development for our young people and for everyone in the Caribbean region. The young people of the Caribbean are not requiring to be saved. We have our own endemic talent and ideas. We are here waiting to be meaningfully engaged and would like to meaningfully contribute. So our call today from the Caribbean is cooperate with us, invest in us, engage, educate, facilitate. We are here, we're waiting, and we're looking forward to the incredible cooperation and partnerships we'll be able to have going forward. I thank you.
I thank Ms. Christina Williams for that important contribution to our discussions. Our final speaker is Mr. Anit Kumar from Fiji. And like Ms. Williams, Mr. Kumar is a member of the European Commission Youth Sounding Board on International Partnerships. Mr. Kumar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honourable Co-Chair. Honourable Co-Presidents, Honourable Members of the Joint Parliamentary Assembly of the African, Caribbean, Pacific and the European Union States, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. Good evening from Fiji and warm Pacific greetings. It is with excitement and a privilege for me to address you all at this 41st plenary session of the Joint Parliamentary Assembly. Honourable Co-Presidents, Honourable Members of Parliament and Excellencies, I am honoured to convey the warm Pacific greetings of our Pacific youth to this Joint Parliamentary Assembly, whose voices I will represent to the best of my abilities this evening as I speak to you all. I am very honoured to join Her Excellency Ms. Emma Theophilus, Deputy Minister of Information, Communication and Technology of the Republic of Namibia, and the Director General of EU's International Partnerships, Mr. Koen Doyens, and two of our amazing youth leaders and colleagues, Britannia and Christina, who have so eloquently set the stage for me during this session. I am pleased to be speaking to you all from the University of the South Pacific's headquarters here in Suva, Fiji, the university which is jointly owned and governed by 12 Pacific Island countries that serves students from diverse backgrounds from all over the Pacific region and beyond. It not only serves the region's need for high-quality tertiary education, research and policy, but also as an organization of regional cooperation and integration. First, allow me to say congratulations to the co-presidents and to every member of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly for coming this far. It is a difficult task to reach an agreement on such a large scale, especially where political will is required. The chief negotiators and delegations from each state have done a tremendous job leading to this negotiated agreement text on the partnership agreement between the EU and its member states and the members of the Organization of African, Caribbean and the Pacific States. And we hope that this new agreement is signed soon. Thank you for showing and proving it to us that diplomacy indeed works and that partnership and collaboration needs to continue post the Cotonou period for the benefit of all our people, places and prospects. Honourable Co-Presidents, Honourable Members of Parliament and Excellencies, as the global economy continues to recover from the coronavirus pandemic, the notion of free trade has somewhat continued to weaken. However, I am pleased to note that the new partnership agreement will play a huge role in different regions, strengthening political partnership between the parties to generating mutually beneficial outcomes on the common and intersecting interests and in accordance with our shared values. It is important to recognize the role that the Joint Parliamentary Assembly has played towards the Cotonou Partnership Agreement and the role that it continues to play. While I understand that the Cotonou Agreement has had its successes, delays and red tapes over the last 2 decades, it is, however, something to celebrate and reflect upon as we move forward. Here in the Pacific, our leaders have been working hard towards resolving many issues ranging from human rights, stable democracies and good governance, poverty, unemployment and inequalities, climate change, and many more. Today, youths make up the largest number of global population, and for developing and underdeveloped states, Educated young population may hold the key for an inclusive economic growth as they will explore various sectors. Honourable Co-Presidents, Honourable Members of Parliament and Excellencies, I would like to invite your attention towards what we think and believe needs to be the priority areas of cooperation as we move forward. I note that the political dialogue between the EU and ACP was one of the pillars of the Cotonou Agreement and has been one of its greatest successes. I would like to implore this August Assembly to continue that political dialogue. We would like to see small islands developing states agenda and development finance, among others, to intensify into political engagement. Addressing issues of sea level rise and climate change related disasters cost a fortune to small island state economies. Societies are changing rapidly from the way we adapt to technological changes to the way we respond to them. And small state economies do not have the luxury nor the resources to really choose what they want. Voices of such small states are often drowned amongst the crowds at negotiation tables. We just have to take what's on offer at many times. It is a matter of life and death for many of us in many ways. We are greatly concerned about our future, especially when we think about the increased intensity of climate change-related disasters that knows no boundaries. It increases inequality across countries. Hence, climate change threatens not only economic growth or SDG 8, but it will also act as a poverty multiplier by increasing the number of poor people and by making poor people even poorer and exacerbating inequalities. As far as the Pacific region is concerned, I wish to highlight the following important areas from the initial text for your attention that needs to be at the heart of the ACP-EU cooperation going forward. Number 1, protecting the oceans and seas from various threats including climate change, ocean acidification, coral bleaching, overexploitation, and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Number 2, improving environmental and climate resilience while pursuing the sustainable management of natural resources. Number 3, building democratic, peaceful, and rights-based societies and making progress in gender equality and financial governance. Bolstering investment and private sector development for sustainable and inclusive economic growth. Number 5, strengthening ocean governance and the conservation and sustainable management of living resources. Number 6, investing in human and social development with special attention to the promotion of youth and to women's and girls' economic, social, and political empowerment. And finally, in relation to the threats posed by climate change and the significant risk incurred by small island developing states, the EU and OCPS must each aim to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. To progress in these areas, rules-based order and multilateralism is key, especially for small state economies. For the Pacific region, organizations such as the Pacific Islands Forum, the Forum Fisheries Agency, the South Pacific Community, and the University of the South Pacific and others will contribute significantly towards addressing the issues on the areas I have highlighted today. In addition to this, I call upon the members of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States to optimize the Georgetown Agreement to deepen cooperation and strengthen ties among the OACPS regions internally at both institutional and membership levels. This will play a key role in building effective alliances in international settings that can drive global actions. Not forgetting that the OCAPS and the EU states occupy more than half of the seats at the United Nations. We can make a huge difference working together. Moreover, this will be important for the future that we all are working towards. Collaboration and partnership must be made solid from the ground up. This will be the foundation upon which we, the future leaders, will build upon. And looking at and reflecting on the amazing work that has been done thus far, through and under your leadership, I am confident that you will leave us a legacy that has a level playing field for every member and one that has progressed in an inclusive and meaningful manner where no one has been left behind. Honourable Co-Presidents, Honourable Members of Parliament and Excellencies, as the Honourable Co-President stated at the beginning of this session, the world is not the same as 20 years ago. A lot has changed, Much is at stake, from matters pertaining to global cooperation, economic relations, political engagement, global peace and security, and trade are all up for modernization to reflect both realities and demands of the 21st century and the expectations of all parties. Finally, I would like to sincerely thank Mr. Carlos Zorino and Mr. Peter Kenny-Lorea Jr., the co-presidents of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly, for giving me this opportunity to speak this evening representing Pacific youths from our Blue Pacific region. I would also like to sincerely convey my gratitude to the EU's Commissioner for International Partnerships, Ms. Jutta Urpilainen, for forming the Youth Sounding Board, which I am part of, that strengthens and brings youth voices together from different regions of the globe, truly making a difference from community level to a global stage. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward for further deliberations.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Anit Kumar, for your important contributions to our discussions. And a big thank you to our three young speakers for their statements. You have given all of us a lot of food for thought. Your ideas and your motivation inspire us and give us hope for the future. Please carry on with your work, spread your ideas to inspire others, and show the leadership that we need for the world of tomorrow and for a better future. Dear colleagues, that concludes our list of presenters. However, before giving the floor to members on the speaking list, I am very happy to welcome and give the floor to two of our former co-presidents who are with us today. Let me start with Mr. Fitz Jackson from Jamaica, who was co-president of this assembly from the end of 2013 to the end of 2015. Mr. Jackson, we would like to invite you to the lectern to give your remarks 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Co-presidents Peter Kenny-Lorea Jr., Carlos Zorino, former fellow co-president Joseph Kono, Excellencies, colleague members of Parliament, JPA members, members of the secretariats of both the JPA and the ACP, I greet you well. And let me say at the outset, if I'm lacking in energy and enthusiasm, I relied upon my fellow Jamaican, Miss Christina Williams, who brought that to the fore. We are at an historical juncture at this time. We have been bestowed with the responsibility of ensuring that a legacy of partnership, cooperation, and friendship is preserved and enhanced. That legacy is one that recognizes a failure emanated out of imperialistic intoxication that resulted in the subjugation of generations of peoples across the geographic regions of Africa, the Pacific, and the Caribbean. And I dare to say, ordinary citizens of the beneficial imperial states, who unwittingly were socialized to believe their own well-being were bound up in the then imperial order. To the credit of the leaders of the various European Union member states, together with leaders of former colonies during the 70s, courageous and concrete steps were taken in an attempt to ameliorate the circumstances that affected peoples across the ACP. Indeed, we also accept that such boldness represented enlightened self-interest, recognizing the long-term requirements of various crucial raw materials and securing markets. This underscores the essence of interdependence. Over the past 45 plus years, much have changed significantly across the ACP and the EU blocs. What has not changed, and remain as it was back then is the imperative of creating a better quality of life for most people in our respective territories. The working groups of the JPA, namely political affairs, economic development, finance and trade, and social affairs, provide for deliberations under these distinct rubrics, which are quite discernible. However, there is a fundamental and critical human developmental benefit that is often overlooked or ignored. That is the opportunity for human interactions and relationship building that serves to enhance the prospects of arriving at compromises and agreements in political, economic, and social spheres. I would believe that the unfortunate occurrence of COVID-19, which has minimized the opportunity of direct person-to-person interaction, has in fact highlighted how optimal the JPA has been. In the context of this final JPA meeting taking place amidst this COVID-19 pandemic, we should consider using the weaknesses highlighted to strengthen our resolve for a more even, equitable, respectful, and humane partnership across the ACP and EU communities. The new JPA to emerge has the opportunity to be a catalyst in this endeavor. For us on the ACP side, we would want to be confident that our colleagues in the JPA who have seats in the European Parliament can be our true allies on issues fully ventilated and agreed upon in the JPA. They will be our evangelists in that chamber where we do not sit. This opportunity, I submit, friends all, is not sufficiently utilized. In this regard, I urge my colleagues in both houses of this assembly to make better use of this opportunity available to us. Notwithstanding the antecedents I make mention of here, the previous partnership agreements have been successful in moving us in a better and more positive position, which ought to be celebrated. We as members and operatives of this JPA have been able to sit together and discuss many sensitive issues that touch the lives of our respective constituents in the ACP and in the EU. And yes, we have successfully arrived at resolutions amidst very dicey moments that could have potentially amputated the JPA and make it substantially non-functional and irrelevant. Indeed, during my own tenure as president and co-president of the ACP and the JPA, respectively, I have had to mediate against such unfortunate occurrences. Yes, sensitive and life-touching issues must be delicately navigated at all times, because the consequences of our failures can have colossal impact on much more lives than those of our own. Such is the responsibility of leadership, and leaders we all are in our own rights. In our respective parliaments, we do meet behind the speaker's chair with our counterparts on delicate but important issues towards acceptable resolutions. Let us do the same in the side rooms of our assembly towards similar ends. Let us remain mindful and that history read tomorrow is being written by what we do or fail to do today. Our concluded successor agreement to the Cotonou is not a perfect agreement. And yes, I am quite mindful that many, if not most of my parliamentary colleagues on the ACP side are not pleased with the dilution of the parliamentary dimension provided for in that agreement. But I would hazard a guess that our counterpart on the EU side do share such displeasure. But as the adage says, don't let us make good the enemy of perfection. Let us seek to optimize all the opportunities of the agreement that is to come into being. The cooperation arrangement that created this joint parliamentary assembly was deliberate in the pursuit of such broader formal interactions between and among peoples of the ACP and the European Union through the people's elected representatives who we are. This, I submit, has been far more effective and successful than what is obtained among the heads and the Council of Ministers. I don't believe anyone can successfully challenge me on this. Co-presidents, brothers and sisters, friends, in closing, I submit that if we allow ourselves to be guided by our shared experiences over the life of the expiring Cotonou and its predecessor Lomé agreements, notwithstanding whatever shortcomings of the new agreement to come in place, we can and must squeeze successes out of it. And why? One of Jamaica's and the Caribbean's iconic singing group, Black Huro, asked that question in one of their top-selling songs many years ago, titled Solidarity. And I quote, "Everybody wants the same thing, don't they? Everybody wants a happy end. They want to see the game on Saturday. They want to be somebody's friend. Everybody wants to work for a living. Everybody wants their children warm. Everybody wants to be forgiven. They want a shelter from the storm. Look at me. I am not your enemy. We walk on common ground. We don't need to fight each other. What we need, solidarity, solidarity." Yes, I am an eternal optimist, but also a pragmatic one. My optimism is kept ablaze by the continuing inspirations from what we have achieved. As we go forward, let us build a bloc in international solidarity in this parliamentary assembly that is indeed fit for the purpose of the post-Cotonou era. This, one of the world's legendary artists, Bob Marley, reminded us to do in one of his profound songs. We, Jah people, can make it work. Come together and make it work. Yeah. We can make it work. We can make it work. Much love. Walk good, my friends.
I thank you very much, Mr. Fitz-Jackson, for those reflections and inspirations moving forward. Let me now move on to Mr. Joseph Kono, co-president from the end of 2017 to the end of 2019. I was pleased to learn of his great investment in the efforts in retaining the JPA in the new agreement. We acknowledge your efforts today. You now have the floor, and please, welcome to the lectern. You have 5 minutes.
Dear co-chairs, my friends, Honorable Carlos Zorinho and Honorable Peter Kinelorea, members of the Secretariat, dear colleagues, my dear friends, honorable members of the JPA, all protocol observed. Let me warmly greet our esteemed colleagues who also acted in this capacity Honorable Sitole, Honorable Straker, Honorable Jackson, and of course, Honorable Louis Michel, who is unfortunately not present with us today. I have been honored in my capacity as former President of the OACP Parliamentary Assembly and former co-president of the JPA to say a few words on the occasion of the celebration of the Cotonou Agreement 20 years of existence. May I then invite you to take a quick glance at Europe and ACP relationship history. 1957, Part 4 of the Treaty of Rome provided for an association of the overseas territory of Belgium, France, the Netherlands, and Italy. The purpose aimed at here was to keep commercial links with former colonies. 1963, signature of the Yaoundé Convention, aiming at the preservation of economic ties with associated states. 1969, signature of Yaoundé II Convention, creating a free trade zone founded on the principle of reciprocity. 1975, signature of the first Lomé Convention, renegotiated and upgraded 4 times. The convention brought many innovations like STABEX, CISMINS, and was proclaimed politically neutral and promoted as a legally binding contract between equals. I insist on that point because the relationship between the EU and the ACP group of states is regarded as a relationship between equals, and it has to be that. And this is also the aim aimed at in the successor to Cotonou Agreement. The 1975 also was the date of the official establishment of the ACP group by the Georgetown Agreement, where it is provided for a JPA. 2000, signature of the Cotonou Agreement concerning trade cooperation and the provision for EPAs. 2008, entry into force of EPAs. 2018, finally, opening of the post-Cotonou negotiations. Chers amis, que de succès engrangés depuis les ambitieux débuts de notre coopération.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a lot of achievements and successes. Since then, we haven't always agreed on everything. But that's quite normal in a household where no one is planning or wanting a divorce. I think now is the time to recall what was said by Commissioner Namicha, that our partnership was the largest, the most complete and most lasting partnership in the world. We're a majority in the United Nations. And we still remember the success of the Paris Agreement, where our group managed to ensure that it was punching at its weight. So we need to be actively involved in all changes taking place in the world in order to reinforce and improve the framework for our partnership. It's important to be able to move on from our colonial past, from victimization, from paternalism, from bureaucratic processes and seeing aid as charity, to resolutely commit ourselves to a relationship of equals, as I said earlier, which obviously benefits both parties, to take into account the particularities of each of the regions, which, as you know, in the agreement, some members may have felt that they were forgotten or that their interests were minimised. That was the case of our friends from the Pacific region, and I think that this agreement will correct that feeling. And then finally, this agreement means that we can be more decisive about achieving the SDGs. That's the spirit of the new agreement that has been finalised and initialed. Dear friends, dear colleagues, who better than parliamentarians can speak authoritatively and legitimately on behalf of the people? And that's how, together, Europeans and members from the ACP, we have managed to successfully call for a strong parliamentary dimension in the post-Cotonou agreement.
Successor agreement to Cotonou is interestingly innovative. I will not recall them all here, but underline one dealing with relations with other institutions and scrutiny. And for this purpose, I will simply quote the OACP Secretariat in their notes. Enhancing parliamentary scrutiny, that has been identified as key to enhancing the parliamentary dimension, and the draft rules include provisions that reflect this priority, namely the introduction of a statement on a key topic, Rule 20, with wind-up resolution, Rule 13. Regular reports on the implementation of the agreement under the steering of Rules and Scrutiny Committee and with external input, Rule 22. Streamlined use of questions to the Commission and the Council, written and in plenary, Rule 18. Closer engagement with the Ambassadorial Committee, ALSOC, in between sessions, Rule 19. Introduction of recommendations to the Council. The organization of workshops on good parliamentary practice, Rule 22(4). That is what we have achieved together, including those who passed away or retired. To conclude, may I urge each of you, dear colleagues, to actively speed up the ratification of the new agreement. You are now in possession of a powerful tool to exert scrutiny, inform your national parliaments, and enhance cooperation between our three regions. Thank you for your kind attention.
I thank Mr. Joseph Connor for your reflections and your encouragement going forward. We are all grateful for yours and Mr. Jackson's presence here with us today and for your wise counsel to us. Now it is time to give the floor to our members, and I have a speakers list with me that we will go through. The first speaker that we will give the floor to is Mr. Michael Gala. You have 5 minutes.
Ja, vielen Dank, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Thank you very much. And particularly thank you to two previous speakers, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Kone, for their words. I'm not feeling quite as optimistic. After 20 years of Cotonou, I think we can say the following. In principle, it's true to say that for such a comprehensive framework of cooperation, there is a specific parliamentary dimension. We have to check and accompany the implementation of what has been agreed, and our expectations have to be worded clearly. Since Cotonou, unlike Lomé, we've been talking about a parliamentary assembly. So when MPs are present, ambassadors don't speak, and if there are no MPs present, it has to be agreed for ambassadors to speak. Now, we've had an interruption in cooperation because of COVID. You can't replace directed debate by an sterile exchange on a computer screen. And this has not really strengthened the situation if we look at the number of assemblies as compared to Cotonou. But I would like to say something. Since 1999, I've been a member of this assembly since 1999. And since 2009, I see a reduction in our presence at all events. I think only 24 members signed up to the list of presence list for the Assembly. That's 20 out of 79. So I think we need to apologize to our colleagues and promise to do better. Now, how can we improve matters in the future? I think alongside the subjects that we're discussing here, we should have regional assemblies to look at how we're doing with implementing what has been agreed. More specifically, with this European Parliament, we need to monitor the Commission, how far the Commission has got with the cooperation with the countries in question, and we should then be able to take that to the regional assemblies. And colleagues for ACP countries, please check in your own countries how far you've got with implementation. At a regional assembly, let's say in the Caribbean, I'd like to hear whether cooperation is going well in country X or whether there are difficulties with implementing what has been agreed with the Commission. And then we should be able to go to the region in question and the Commission and say what we expect, how we expect things to be improved. That is the rule of parliamentarians, and I hope that we will shoulder this task rather than just being an echo chamber for the opinion of the executive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gala, for your intervention and for sticking within your time allocation. And I'll give the floor to Honourable Salah, the Gambia. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Honourable President. This is the beginning of the end and the beginning of another beginning. And as the last speaker said, the question of optimism must be interrogated. Article 8 talks about a quorum of 1/3 of each house. We don't even have a quorum. From the very beginning, we could have questioned it and we would not have had any session. But since this is the last, we had to let it go, those of us who believe in the rule of law. Essentially, Honourable President, we must understand what development cooperation is all about and its genesis. The real thinkers of Europe, those who really created the European Union, were very alert to a divided world in the 60s and saw the dangers after the Second World War that Europe had to develop, and it had to have partners, sources of raw materials, minerals, to be able to continue its industrialization process. And they were very creative in creating Yaoundé and the Lomé Convention, ensuring preferences, ensuring subsidies of agricultural products and minerals because they knew that they were gaining huge benefit from value added. And as a result, they wanted to share that profit so that we will also benefit from that from develop. So it was a sharing basis, not the narrow nationalist sentiments thinking that you are taking European tax money and giving it to ACP states. Those people were ingenious. They calculated, they saw that Europe was gaining from our economies and it was Europe also to give back. But that mentality is disappearing with this new generation. I don't know how creative the new generation is, but they need to reinvent their cooperation strategies. We live in a world where, Honorable President, we first started a revolution, what you call the national revolution of states becoming sovereign. The national revolution led to the sovereignty of states, but we had strong leaders who did not really involve the people. And a new revolution had to be taken, a revolution for the sovereignty of people. We started that process. Just look at our ECOWAS. We came to a point where we were even controlling the executive with 2 term limits. There were only 2 countries left before this new evolution of coup d'etats, where there were term limits. I belong to a generation which fought for change. I came to this assembly to replace Honorable Neti Balde, who was even your co-president, because I was leading a coalition. I was the spokesperson of our coalition. I was also the spokesperson of the president who won in the coalition. And I was faced with the same critical situation as the president of Ukraine. We had a transition. I was there handling our country. And the danger of death was there. And I had to make crucial decisions, faced with the decision of whether we will win an election and then enter war. That's what I was faced with. And I knew that war was politics by other means. We cannot afford to win an election and then lose it by war.
Thank you. You can start to wind up. Thank you.
Yes, unfortunately. But essentially, what I'm emphasizing is that all of us must have a heart that beat in unison with the heartbeat of the people of the world. All of us must feel the suffering of the world. All of us must be allowed to speak conscience. What we must avoid is Europe thinking that we are going to be its sphere of influence. There are no superpowers, my last word. Otherwise, Afghanistan will not be left to those who are controlling it today if America was a superpower. There are no superpowers. That's why Syria is what it is now today, a country where the people cannot. Look at Iraq. Look at all the world. There are no superpowers, China, Taiwan. We should abandon the superpower ideology. We should abandon spheres of influence. We should begin a cooperation of equality, knowing that in all parts of the globe, there are people of conscience, but they are not yet in power. How do we empower all those people so that we rid this world of tyrants, people who do not feel the suffering of people who do not need to change the world? It's not that your interpretation is correct, that African states do not want to condemn Russia. We do not want to be part of your foreign policy. We do not want you to use us. We want to be free to determine for ourselves whether we condemn or not condemn and when we will condemn. So it is important for you to change your mentality, that we need to understand that we are all equal, and sometimes we are in fact more advanced than you in thinking of what should be done about the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that intervention, the Gambia. I now give the floor to Mr. Hans Hyde. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Co-President, and a very special thank to our guest speakers. And today we are celebrating the beginning of a new era and look back in gratitude on our unique and indanceable cooperation. And my words will be carefully but optimistic. For 20 years, the Cotonou Agreement focused on development aid, trade relations and the development of the ACP countries. The political and economic context have changed, and the new agreement reflects the new realities and global challenges, which require joint actions and responses. The new agreement is based on a true political partnership on equal footing. The OACP states and the EU share common interests and act together to address climate change, health threats, development goals, and many more pressing issues. For my S&D group, the main priorities were from the beginning the defence of a strong parliamentary dimension, the effective protection of human rights, and a strengthened role for the civil society. The agreement puts its core to the access to universal, inclusive and quality education at all levels, establishing social protection systems, creating decent jobs and ensuring food. And a special focus is given on the empowering of young people. Especially they need our utmost attention. Their visions and ideas must guide us in our daily work. And I'm very optimistic and extremely satisfied by what I've heard by the young speakers who were contributing to this debate at the beginning, and they are the future of our cooperation. Taking into account the threats imposed by the current pandemic, the new treaty is also addressing health and the fight of global health threats. Our future joint parliamentary assembly and the regional assemblies are ready to be a strong voice for the people in the European Union and in the organisation of ACP countries. We together represent over 1.5 billion people and more than half of the seats of the United Nations. This should be and can be a role model for the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention, Mr. Hyde. Now I give the floor to Honourable Vieira, Guinea-Bissau. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honourable members of this august assembly, allow me to express my deepest gratitude for the privilege of addressing this, the 41st session of Joint Parliamentary Assembly. On behalf of the delegation of Guinea-Bissau, I would like to commend you, Mr. Chairman, on your leadership in this process, and to the speakers for the clarity of their presentation. We came to Strasbourg not only to exchange views on the current issues, global issues of interest to ACP, European Union, but also to seek a long, lasting and meaningful relationship based on mutual interest and mutual respect. The 20 years of Cotonou Partnership Agreement allowed to strengthen the cooperation among our states, despite the enormous challenges that still lie ahead. It is our understanding that the Joint Parliamentary Assembly should be more proactive and more interventionist, both during the negotiation and implementation process. What we mean by this is not to play the role of the chief negotiators, but to follow strictly every step of the way. Monsieur le Président, honorable members.
Mr. Co-President, honourable members of the Parliament, when we talked about threats to stability, security and democracy in Western and Sahelian Africa, one important subject for Guinea-Bissau, but unfortunately we weren't able to make our contribution for reasons outside of our will. But what we wanted to do was to underline the weakness of our democracy when faced with the threats of terrorism, organised international crime, something which means that we often see destabilization of the most fragile African countries. Reinforcing our social and economic fabric would be the most effective way, without a doubt, of overcoming crises in security in our region. I would recall only integrated international cooperation can actually provide a response to these problems without prejudice to the responsibilities that we hold as Africans. President, members of this House, if I may, I would like to make the point that threats to democracy, stability, security in Western Africa are very real. At the moment, Guinea-Bissau has twice actually had to dissolve its its parliament, and we have seen interference of foreign powers in our politics. This climate of insecurity in Western Africa and Sahelian Africa does require a strong partnership, a realistic partnership provided by member states. It's our conviction that the next 20 years of our parliamentary cooperation between the ACP and EU will mean that we can agree that we need to set conditions for all ACP countries to strengthen the principles of democracy and to ensure that the spectre of wars amongst brothers can never become a possibility, whilst also combating climate change. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much for that intervention, Guinea-Bissau. And I'll give the floor to Mr. Bijot. You have 3 minutes.
Co-President, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, dear friends, once again I'm very touched by the messages of the young people that we heard earlier. Something extremely important has happened here just a few minutes ago. Africa, Caribbean, the Pacific. But if we'd actually asked a young person from Europe, they'd have said exactly the same thing. Each of them passed on a torch to us, a torch of the hope of our young people. And now we have that hope passed on to us, and that's a message, but also a demand that we work together to build a path to the future, a path bringing us all together, the path of our common destiny, a path that we can have trust in whilst showing mutual respect, and a path where we can make progress standing tall. I am French, I am European, I come from a small island of the Indian Ocean to the east of Madagascar and Africa, and I know, as all of you do, how important collective intelligence is. I know, as each of you do, how important cooperation is, how important mutual trust is. The message we've received from our young people, we have received at a very important point in time, a point where we are seeing crises and urgent situations converge. We owe it to young people to work together and, as a part of our partnership, to find the solutions our citizens expect of us in each of our countries, the solutions that our young people expect of us, our young people who are so talented in all of our countries and regions. We do need to speed up the signing of this agreement, of this new framework for partnership, because each of us are confronted both by economic challenges, and we'll see that the war in Ukraine